Hello, everyone. So today is Free Comic Book Day, and I'm celebrating Free Comic Book Day the way I celebrate every Free Comic Book Day by assiduously avoiding all comic book shops and even comic book news websites. I did a whole video about it, but I just think this whole thing doesn't make sense, and it actually just encourages like bad behavior between customers and shop owners, and it really doesn't bring in any new readers. But something very, very important to the comic industry, only to me, happened today, is that I hit 10,000 views on my YouTube channel, so thanks for that. The cool thing is that YouTube has an app called Studio, or Creator Studio, and has an analytics page. And I've been watching this demographic number and it stayed very, very steady. So I have no reason to believe that this number is not going to change. And that's the percentage of viewers who are male and who are female. And it's about 94% male and it's about 6% female. And it's been that way for the last week or so. And 10,000 is a pretty good sample number. That's much higher than most, nationally released polls are. Usually they do like about 800 to 1,000 people. This made me think about, things in the modern comics industry and how many articles I've seen over the years that have stated up to 50% of the comic book reading audience is female. The highest I saw was 46.4%, something like that. So I've been reading these articles for several years, and that's been one of those settled science type of things. You can't argue it, even though no one sees this ever. Almost no one goes to any comic book shop in the country and sees anywhere near 46% or 50% of female clientele. I really think that this is a completely fake number that's just meant to match it to what women are in the general populace. These are stepped on fake polls. So there's this phrase I heard. The phrase was, lie to the whole world, lie to God, but don't lie to yourself. Anyone who's been to a comic book convention, comic book company, or comic book stores, with very rare exceptions, has seen basically what matches my YouTube demographic for viewership, which is vast supermajority are male. So my question is, what's wrong with that? We've spent a couple years lying to ourselves that half of the comic book audience, half of comic book fans are female, and that's not true. Now, I think that started as a lot of bad ideas start with good intentions, that people hoped it was true, and if they didn't look at the facts or if they fudged them a little bit, it could kind of look true. But there's really no reason to do that. There's no reason to lie, continually lie, and there's no reason to apparently want to force women into a hobby that they're just not into. It's this weird thing where you're trying to give women agency and independence, and then you're saying, boy, you just don't like this thing. By the way, you have to like it. I put a picture of Squirrel Girl here, and this is actually, Squirrel Girl is not drawn like this in the comics. I think actually she would do better if she was drawn like this. They've decided to do a body diversity, alternate beauty, everyone's beautiful model, and the book does bad, and it repeatedly does bad. They keep saying that the book does good in digital, but they never release the digital sales. So it's kind of hard to believe that there's this magical audience, because if they could prove it, they would prove it. They would show the numbers. There's no reason to keep it secret. There's no legitimate reason to keep digital sales secret. We've spent a couple years really pushing female heroes and female, I'm not even going to say female appealing art styles. I think it's what people assume or want women to like. So this weird kind of Archie style, almost like a coloring book style, has come in. We've seen that on Hellcat. We saw that on Squirrel Girl in her many reboot. We see that to some extent with Miss Marvel. It's this very flat. It's the everyone gets a trophy style of drawing. Like, you tried. When all you get is you tried, that's why this stuff sells 12 to 15,000 and gets, always gets canceled at issue 6. Everything I say here is opinion, but I think, and I'd like to hear your responses, but I don't think there's anything wrong with, we gave it the good college try to get more women, and women just aren't into superhero comics. Men and women aren't the same. They have different interests. Nobody's looking at the romance novel industry and saying, man, we really need men. They're doing fine it's something that appeals to women more than it does to men. You could get me to read a romance novel if you basically made it The Expendables. But then it's not a romance novel anymore, it's The Expendables. It becomes a thing of like, why don't we just stop and admit that superheroes is a genre that mainly appeals to men as kid gloves in a very condescending way. Female superheroes are typically very chirpy, kind of childlike, or very, very cold-hearted. So you got the, Kamala Khan and Gwenpool and Squirrel Girl, and they all have essentially the same chirpy fangirl personality. Several of them are supposed to be adults, and yet they act like very, very young children. And then you have the ultra serious, pretty much miserable, like the latest version of Mockingbird. Miss Marvel is a key example of just a miserable, cold person. But they both have the same thing. They tend to beat villains very easily. They tend to get emotionally validated constantly. They just kind of come into a room and they're instantly liked. There's this thing that constantly happens in modern Marvel comics where one female character will enter a room with another female character and they will instantly just love each other just because they're both women. And they've even formed, more than once Marvel has formed entire teams of women, and they always, women work great together. So I'm kind of closing a door and then I'm reopening it saying, okay, yeah, we tried to appeal to women, but they tried in the most condescending, illegitimate, unnatural way. They didn't treat women as real heroes. They put them with kid gloves, and they basically made them like, it's almost like characters on like a PBS kids show, like everything has to be safe. Have you ever been worried for Kamala Khan? Ever? Has she ever just been wrecked on every physical and emotional level like Spider-Man was when he was like a 15-year-old hero? He was getting beat up constantly. So because this is where politics just kind of wrecks good stories, because you could do some really good dramatic stories with Kamala Khan, but you'd have to have her lose, and you'd have to have her not be emotionally validated. You'd have to have her not be right all the time and not always say the right cool thing. You'd have to have Riri Williams come in and actually have to prove herself for years or decades in the comics, which equates to months or years in real time in the comic universe. And the people writing this, they don't seem to be able to do this. I'm going through Marvel Universe, and it's from the 80s, so I'm reading about characters, a lot of female characters, and they're actually written really well. A lot of them start as villains. A lot of them flip back and forth between heroes and villains. They have these very complex storylines. They're behind the eight ball, just like Marvel heroes. I mean, I do think superheroes is just one of those things that's always going to appeal mostly to men and boys. But I mean, even kids don't really like comics anymore. So it's going to mainly appeal to men. And even female action heroes tend to appeal mainly to men. So if you really want to give the old college try to get female audiences in, you could try writing women the way you used to write women, which was as human beings who made mistakes, who had to try, who failed a lot. They were basically written exactly the same as, I mean, you have to go really far back in Marvel, like literally like the first 3 issues of Fantastic Four to see any female character treated like a 50s housewife. They've always been heroes. They've always had problems. They've always made mistakes until like 4 years ago, and now they're basically like Disney tween sitcom lead characters who just, they walk into the room and everyone starts clapping. So tell me what you think. Tell me if women actually like this emotional validation Archie style art. Especially respond if you're a woman. Give me your thoughts. I mean, my classic era was the 1980s Marvel X-Men, which was half women, had a female leader, and man, everyone on that team just got treated like dirt by the writer. They just went through the ringer every story arc, and that was great, and those comics sold hundreds of thousands. So I think in a weird way they did an experiment after the theory had been proven, but then their new theory was worse than the old one. The old theory was just write women like you write men, like you write them like they're people, write them with, strengths and weaknesses. The new one is treat every woman as if she's a second grader and she's just going to burst into tears at any moment. So just constantly like pat her on the head. By the way, that's not condescending. I'm not sure why. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I'll have another video up tomorrow.